So this lecture is on narrative tension and conflict. The objectives are we will go over some terms and definitions, external and internal conflicts, how to build conflict in your own writing, discussion on your short fiction assignment. Please don't panic. This isn't due until the 19th of February at 9 p.m. And also we're going to consider George Orwell's short story, Shooting an Elephant, in terms of external and internal conflicts. So for terms and definitions, I'm going to, while I'm going through this lecture, I'll refer to film, probably some TV, books, of course, while I discuss not only these terms, but the definitions, but other aspects as we move through this lecture. And I'm sure that you all know that a narrative is synonymous with story. It used to refer to almost solely creative writing. However, the term, like the word narrative, is used somewhat generically at this point to merely like as a synonym for story. If you don't have a conflict in your writing, you may not have much actually happening. So you can get away with this to some degree in certain genres of writing, such as poetry, postcard short stories, perhaps some nonfiction. I'm going to say I think even those genres require some tension, some conflict. However, definitely in most writing, you're going to need a conflict externally and internally, meaning conflicts that are out in the world of the story and conflicts that are within the internal world of usually the protagonist, but characters in general within your story world. Remember that if you haven't conflict within your writing, then you're lacking in all likelihood tension. Tension and conflict will bring a story to life. It's often that thing that a reader will become invested in. It should capture your reader's attention and their curiosity. So external conflict refers to conflict that is placing your character at odds with forces that are outside of themselves. Conflicts are a conflict that stands in the way of a character's own, like their own motivations, their needs, desires, and as a result, this creates tension. A sort of old-fashioned notion of external conflict is your character versus another person, the antagonist. So think of Harry Potter facing Voldemort and the Death Eaters. This is an external conflict of the protagonist, Harry Potter, against the antagonist, Voldemort. So you could also think of character versus society. Here your character faces conflict due to a type of societal norm that is in conflict with their beliefs. I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with older pieces of literature, but like The Grapes of Wrath or certainly To Kill a Mockingbird, written by Harper Lee. Here the character Scout experiences external conflict when the racism that is present in the town she's living in, Macomb, Alabama, comes into conflict with her beliefs and the beliefs that her father, Atticus, teaches her. Also, you might be familiar with S.E. Hinton's The Outsiders, which illustrates the greasers' external conflict with the socias, which we're looking at protagonist versus antagonist, as well as societal conflicts based upon the greasers' class system and the way society is looking down upon them. So the outsiders actually comes to a head when the protagonist, Ponyboy, and his best friend Johnny choose to enter a burning church to save children. And this becomes an example of character versus nature. So if we're looking at character versus nature, this is when your character comes up against a force of nature like a tornado, a fire, mountain climbing, plane crashes, the cold, a desert, and so on. So internal conflict refers to the character struggling with things within themselves. So a really good example is the narrator from the book Fight Club. You might be familiar with the film, although that's pretty old at this point as well. The book was written by Chuck Palahniuk. I'm Palahniuk. Please forgive my terrible pronunciation of this man's surname. His book was obviously adapted into movie. It is an excellent example of internal conflict. The narrator is struggling with mundane life so extremely, like so profoundly, that he internally creates an alter ego named Tyler Durden. And these two parts of the one person come to a head at the end of the story when the readers and the characters realize they are the same person. I believe Tyler Durden always knows that uh, he's part of the narrator. So there's an area that exemplifies the narrator's internal struggle, and when he is saying, maybe self-improvement isn't the answer. Tyler never knew his father. Maybe self-destruction is the answer. So in that passage, the narrator is having an existential internal struggle. He's trying to understand like the meaning of his life, his existence, and how an unwanted person could fit into a perfect society. So he feels flawed and like incomplete. The narrator concludes that since perfect isn't the answer, that this idea of self-destruction is. Another really famous example of internal conflict, of course, is in Shakespeare's play Hamlet, and of course is the main character Hamlet. So there are several moral internal conflicts. Hamlet struggles with wanting to kill his uncle Claudius in revenge. He also struggles internally with his own depression and thoughts of suicide. And we see this particularly in that famous scene in Act 3, Scene 1, where Hamlet's struggle with suicide thoughts is that very famous soliloquy, to be or not to be. That is the question, whether 'tis nobler in the mind to suffer the slings and arrows of outrageous misfortune, etc. So there's this, that is his suicide contemplation. And his need for revenge is very strong as well. Even the ghost of his father is calling for it. His father's ghost wants his son Hamlet to kill his uncle Claudius, who is now his stepfather. So, but Hamlet, his internal struggle is he doesn't want to kill Claudius out of revenge. It's almost like a moral conflict to him, and it throws him into this deep depression that seems to, in the play, almost become like a madness. And I mean like madness as in that the original meaning of the word mad, crazy, mentally unstable. So this in turn creates an even deeper internal conflict in Hamlet of whether it's better to live in pain or to die and end the suffering. So those are, that's a lot I know for terms and definitions, but they're very important in your own writing. So if we're thinking about like how to build conflict in your writing, so your first like kind of like officially graded assignment is a piece of short fiction. I'm asking you to write a short story that relies upon a sequence of events where you need to use or utilize tension and conflict. So consider like even movies. They'll often begin with either a scene of happiness, which normally means that things are going to come apart, or if it starts out kind of in chaos, it means that things are going to in some way come together. So if we think of Stephanie Meyer's Twilight, which opens with Bella in first person narration telling the reader that she would die for love. We are opened with this really dramatic death scene of kind of chaos and this profound statement of love. And then we shift back in time to Bella's leaving Phoenix and the custody. She's in the custody of her mother, and she moves to Forks, Washington, to live with her father. So tension begins somewhat with Edward Cullen. Like the two of them have a lot of internal conflicts about one another and themselves, that also acts as external conflicts. But the real antagonists in the first novel, Twilight, are the traveling band of vampires, James, Victoria, and Laurent. So, two kinds of conflict you might want to think about while you're working on your assignment, your short story, is external conflict and internal conflict. Stories must have both. So in Twilight, both Edward and Bella have their internal conflicts regarding one another, as well as their external conflicts, whether it's those old sort of vampire god led by Aro or the traveling vampires from the first book. You might also want to consider the conflict in your assigned reading. George Orwell shooting an elephant. The unnamed narrator forces more than one external challenge. He faces an elephant that is causing harm and has killed a man, but when the narrator encounters this elephant, it seems to him harmless. Yet the narrator is being asked to kill the elephant, like demanded by the people uh, that he is, in essence, occupying, that he must kill the elephant. But he does not want to do this. So there's a societal conflict in that the narrator is carrying a role as a British official. And in that role, he's hated by the people that the empire, the British Empire, is occupying, and that the empire has colonized. So British imperialism at the time in the story is in the midst of falling apart or falling away. The narrator feels conflicting emotions towards the people that he rules as a British officer. It's this position that places him um, in that role of having to kill the elephant. And the elephant doesn't die quickly. Note that these conflicts carry the theme of power and how it fluctuates. And power is not a stable thing that we might first think it is or it should be. So, how to build conflict in your writing. So, stories, as in life, contain multiple conflicts, and multiple conflicts may take place. All conflicts in stories should tie together. They should be crafted to fit together. That they will be, in essence, that you are working to weave these all together or fit together like pieces of a puzzle. So if we look at George Orwell's story again, the narrator is tasked with shooting an elephant. He is a British colonial presence in this empire that is beginning to fall apart. These external conflicts task to kill an elephant. Elephants are difficult to kill, and the fall of the British Empire are all inextricably connected. And these all connect internally and externally. And all these conflicts connect to bring a fuller development to the character, to the narrator. And the narrator doesn't want to shoot the elephant, but he also doesn't want to be made fun of, to be laughed at or ridiculed for not shooting the elephant. His reactions to the conflict reveal who the narrator is becoming. So, number 3, give external conflicts their own arcs. So remember to keep your timeline with your external conflict. It must rise or reach a point of like a pinnacle and then taper off. Consider how the external conflict within your story is affecting your character internally. Make sure your external conflict or conflicts have an arc, a timeline, a movement, and are all connected with the internal conflict or conflicts. So thank you very much, and I hope this finds all of you very well. If you have any questions, please email me or reach out to me. I'm here for you, in all the ways that I can be. I know that's, awkward at this point with COVID, but yeah, and of course, please feel free to even if you don't have any questions Wednesdays, you're of course more than welcome to pop in and say hello. And yeah, I hope that you are all doing well. Okay, thanks. Bye.